Mesdames et messieurs,
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
nos panélistes sont en cours. Ils vont venir.
our panelists are arriving right now. They're already at UNESCO, but since the building is quite large, it'll take them a little bit longer to get here. So I'll just say a few words about the next panel.
Il y a plus de 10 ans de cela,
For
en
over 10 years,
2008,
starting in 2008,
l'UNESCO et l'UNICEF
UNESCO and UNICEF published a book in 2008
Apprendre à
called
vivre ensemble.
Learning to Coexist.
Un programme interculturel et
It
interreligieux
lays out an intercultural and interreligious program called Learn to Live Together. So it lays out an ethics program. So if you go on the UNESCO website and you type out Learning to Live Together, you'll see a link to this book,
2008.
which was published in 2008.
Actuellement, l'UNESCO a intégré dans son programme d'éducation
In its education program,
l'éducation
UNESCO has incorporated citizenship, global citizenship education.
et c'est justement ce sujet, ce grand sujet,
And it is this topic,
l'éducation à la citoyenneté
the topic
mondiale,
of global citizenship
que nous
education,
allons aborder pendant
which
cette
we will discuss
table ronde.
during this panel.
Notre table ronde
Our panel
qui aura comme thème
will focus on the following theme:
la contribution de l'amour
the
véritable
contribution
à
of
la
true love
citoyenneté mondiale
to global citizenship.
va alors mettre ensemble
Thus, our panel will
deux approches
bring together two different approaches, two ways of thought,
vont mettre en évidence
and it will
les
also
opportunités
highlight
et les
some
possibilités
opportunities
que donne
and some of the possibilities created by global citizenship education
et véritable.
in order to establish true peace.
J'invite Dr Faouzi
I'd like to invite Dr. Faouzi
Skali
Skali
de rejoindre les panélistes
to join us up here with the panelists.
et merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Et
Thank you.
maintenant, la totalité des panélistes sont sur
Now, all of our
Succès.
panelists have come up to the stage.
et je donne très humblement
And I would like to
la parole.
humbly give the floor,
Je vais vous asseoir.
and please sit down, please take a seat.
Je vous donne, je donne la parole à son Excellence Lare.
I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sankardja, Lare Sambiani, Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Togo to UNESCO,
Cette table
to
ronde.
serve as the moderator of this panel. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général.
Thank you,
Je souhaite encore
Secretary General.
à tous les
I would like
participants.
to welcome all of our participants to this panel, to this conference,
Surtout souhaiter la bienvenue
and I would also like
aux
to
panélistes qui
welcome
vont intervenir tout à l'heure.
not just all of our participants, but also the panelists who will be speaking about the contribution of true love to global citizenship.
Le
The Secretary General has already laid the groundwork for this discussion, so I won't take up too much time, but I would just like to say that this theme is certainly related to a nexus of ideas, of actions that we need to undertake in order to achieve global citizenship. We will be discussing several topics. We will be discussing them in some detail, and here I would like to introduce our panelists. First, Dr. Faouzi Skali, also Miss Lydia Ruprecht, the Venerable Shin, and His Excellency Ambassador Ahmad Jalali, who has not arrived yet, but I hope that he will be able to make it to join our panelists. At first, we will speak about the promotion of intercultural, interreligious dialogue in a globalized world. Dr. Faouzi Skali is a doctor in anthropology, ethnology, and religious studies. This is extremely relevant. This is an interesting topic, and I would like to invite everyone to listen to Dr. Skali's presentation. Distinguished friends, I am happy to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers of this wonderful meeting. It's also a very useful one because it creates an opportunity for us to think about the ways in which we can discuss the issue of interreligious dialogue in the current world. Now, what I mean by today's world is the global context in which we're living, and of course, a globalized world, which we mention so often. We must take into consideration a certain number of new principles, and these are principles which we must explore. When we talk about globalization, it's important to remember that since the First World War, the Second World War, there has been a crisis of nations which led to a rise in nationalist feeling. So at the time, this wave of nationalism led to the need to give up certain aspects of countries' sovereignty in order to join regional, global, regional, and global organizations. And we today here represent an organization which arose out of these types of governance and global organization. And after this, we saw the rise of an ideological conflict between the East and the West, and eventually we could say that this conflict imploded, opening up a new path, creating a new situation, which made it possible to project our cultures and religions into an interdependent and interconnected world. These cultures and religions then had a space which was relatively independent, and they maintained a certain level of independence. So this gave rise to new forms of culture, which encountered different religions. And this led to certain questions. There were some theories proposed by thinkers. So the first trend that was proposed was a closing in, a reaction of exclusion, of isolationism, or even a clash of religions, a clash of civilizations, as some said. Why? Because when we end up in a world which we don't understand, which we can't comprehend, it's important at this point to be able to find some kind of guide two coexisting, two living together in a new and globalized world.
Il se trouve que nous avons une petite expérience à Fès, au Maroc.
In Morocco, we conducted an experiment right after the First World War, so this was in 1991. We realized that we entered a world, this was in Fès, in a region which could become potentially hostile and volatile, pitting people one against another. This could easily be instrumentalized politically and in terms of ideology as well. So the first reaction that we had was to create Fès, a festival of sacred music. This is a festival which continues today. It has been around for over 20 years. And the idea behind this festival, well, of course, was to bring together all sacred music in one place, so that people could take part in concerts, allowing them to express themselves using the same platform. And people came from all over the world because everyone was invited and affected who could learn from each other and meet each other through this event. Fès created a kind of push at the global level, because up until now, we have had the three Abrahamic religions, and there we brought together all religions of the world, including Hindus, Taoists, Buddhists, and others. And this is something that's very important, because dialogue is not only based on discourse and words, but also experiences. Sacred music, religious music, is something that is part of the fabric of time. And so in order, it carries a memory, a feeling of beauty, which we would like to share with others. And here, we're not just trying to convince others, we're not trying to convince them of anything, but rather we're trying to learn about them as they are. There's nothing to defend, there's nothing that people are trying to create an argument for, but it is more about understanding. So we tried to address spiritual traditions and heritage, which is something very important up until today. I've been trying to connect this with our theme of today, but I'm just going to take a quick drink of water.
Alors la question à partir de cet événement-là, il a été question.
So at this event, we wanted to create a group, a symposium that is part of this multi-legacy approach, multi-heritage approach. And we wanted to call this symposium Soul for Globalization. We are experiencing a technological globalization, increasing interdependence in terms of our societies and economies. And so we thought that globalization generally has economic and social implications in terms of immigration and so forth. But doesn't globalization also need to have a cultural content or even maybe a spiritual component? Shouldn't all of these spiritual traditions come together and together grant a soul or a content to this globalization so that we can undergo globalization as a human civilization? Because in spite of technological developments, globalization is still a bit cultureless. Therefore, we can draw on our experiences, on our wisdom and spirituality in order to bring something and contribute it to this world, which up till now has been mostly based on material things and has become more and more materialistic. Because when we talk about globalization, it is generally from a materialistic standpoint. And that is why it is important for all of us to have one consideration. If we look at all of the world's spiritual traditions with their spiritual associations and wisdom, human experience, if together we could forge a paradigm, a set of values. Because after all, what is a spiritual convergence? It means that we come together and have common values. Perhaps in some of our traditions we talk about, for example, altruism and the importance of not being selfish, of the value of humility and of respecting others, the value of respecting nature, the environment. All of these values are at the heart of many of our traditions. So the question that we must consider is whether the fabric of our traditions, of whether all of these values could help us give globalization a soul. And also consider the artistic aspect. For example, music, poetry, our material legacy from our different heritages. Can we create a convergence of all of these different elements in order to instill globalization with a meaning and together build a civilization, a human civilization, of course, because what kinds of threats are we facing today? Well, what we are facing is the threat of losing the humanitarian aspect of our civilization. Humanism, which was born in the 14th century and then developed in the 18th and 19th centuries in the West, means trying to free ourselves of religion. This is one of the central tenets of humanism. But by giving up this religious aspect, today, given the challenges facing humanism, transhumanism, augmented humans and so forth, humanism is actually collapsing under these challenges. So we should do our best to not lose the best part of humanism, including our religion and spirituality. It is only in this way that we will be able to make a contribution and address these issues. But beyond this, beyond these values and common values, we have certain common values that we can discern from many different traditions, which is, don't do unto others as you would not like them to do unto yourself. It's the golden rule, the golden maxim, which you can find in the African classics, the African sages, the Asian sages have said this as well, and of course the Abrahamic religions also have this maxim. And we're very far from this kind of spirituality in our current world, beset with crises, mired in ever more serious crises. And there is yet another aspect which was highlighted by the Indian Nobel Prize winner in economics, Amartya Sen, who spoke about the need to create a intercultural and interreligious democracy. In other words, we need to start to think about how we can govern this diversity and this plurality. Perhaps several decades ago, there was no need for this, because each of us took care of ourselves. But today, we all take up the same space, so we need to be able to have a form of governance for cultural diversity, for religious diversity. And this doesn't depend on whether we're believers or not. What we have is the reality on the ground. It already exists, and so we need to seek out a way of managing and governing it so as to enhance the dignity of humanity. And our discussions today, I think, are extremely fruitful. Next, There's the question of the fact that this work, which has been going on for over 20 years, it's important to address religious dialogue, interreligious dialogue, against the backdrop of our cultural and religious heritage. Because in governing diversity, what we are realizing is that this heritage belongs to all of humanity, not just the heritage of one particular community, of the community to which it belongs. For example, religious music sometimes is not just the property of the religious community which uses it, but rather it is a heritage of everyone. Its aesthetics, its embodiment of a kind of memory makes it the heritage of all of humanity. And so we must work hand in hand in order to enhance humanity's heritage. This heritage plays a very important social role and a very important human role as well. And this leads us to something that is closely related to our theme for today, which is that global citizenship today is not just an abstract concept or a legal concept. I could say, of course, I'm a citizen of the world. Rather, it's a citizenship that is connected to its roots, its heritage. It's plural in its forms, even though individually we do have a spiritual connection to our tradition. But as citizens, all of these different forms of heritage are mine, and they affect my life. It's another angle of looking at teaching and education. How do we teach citizenship, cultural citizenship, multicultural citizenship? How do we include this concept in our education in schools? And how do we teach religion as a form of cultural heritage? This is our heritage. We are discovering it. And also our personal beliefs, of course, are issues that we're not going to address. And I think that it is a very important factor that will help us to bridge a spiritual and cultural heritage approach with a secular approach. And this is not a contradiction. This is completely mutually compatible. Sometimes we're afraid. We're afraid we're sliding into a realm that's no longer secular. But I think we have to think of it as a kind of heritage of all of humanity. And we can think of religious sites as places of knowledge, places of education, which are very important for building citizenship, for instilling values of citizenship in our young people, to encourage them to open up to the world, to understand the world in its diversity of expressions and cultures. From this standpoint, I would like to say in conclusion that we continued the Festival of Fez experiment, and we created a new festival, which is a Sufi culture festival. It is only by accepting and understanding Sufism that we can learn. So if Sufism is a personal spiritual choice. So if we celebrate Sufi culture, this means that we are celebrating some of the mysticism of Islam. And we should remember to place it against the context of living culture, of a living art, dances, performances, poetry, common values. We should place it against the backdrop of our common vision of the world, making it into something to explore, to share. Moreover, of course, this can be a personal, spiritual journey, but that is a different subject. In conclusion, I will just say that if we address all traditions we are trying to enhance our spiritual heritage. We wouldn't want to, we will lead to a bringing together, a nexus, an enhancement, not a clash, as it perhaps could happen if we were to go down the wrong path. This is why I would like to conclude by saying just a few words about governance. This idea of cultural governance is an idea that was proposed by Adi Diouf, and also another, Madame Pateba, another African who worked at UNESCO at different, using different platforms, who said that, well, he had a good sense of the world to come, and he was truly a genius who understood how we will be living. So he said, if you are like me, you are my brother. But if you're not like me, you're even more so my brother, because you are embodying what I am not. Also, in Africa, when an old man dies, a library burns. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Faouzi Skali, for developing this topic, which was entrusted to you. And judging by what you've said, there was a sort of closeted attitude of religions vis-à-vis themselves, which meant the religions were cloistered and no longer listened to each other or heard each other. But you have an appeal here. Religions must speak to each other. We must break out of this cloistered, blinkered, closeted vision so that we have a much more viable world, and spiritual and cultural civilizations must open up to develop something which is more constructive. And I also pick up on what you said about this maxim, do not do to others what you would not do to yourself. And that, I think, is very important in getting religions and the whole of civilization to understand each other. And the important thing is to have an enrichment of each other's cultural heritage, so that they communicate, they intermingle to produce something which is even richer for humanity. So thank you very much, Dr. Skali. And thereupon we continue our panel with Mrs. Lydia Ruprecht, who is the Senior Program Specialist for the section of Global Citizenship and Peace Education. We've asked her to talk about global citizenship education issues and perspectives. You have the floor. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it's also a pleasure for me to be with you. It's a break in a very busy schedule, and I think it's a break which could be very salutary in today's world for us to give ourselves the time to ponder and mull over issues which are certainly not secondary. Indeed, they're fundamental, and we have too little opportunity to mull over them. I was going to speak in English. I hope that's not a problem.
So I'll switch to English, and then maybe later on in my presentation I'll go back to French. So I guess it's time to put your headsets on. So I've been asked to speak about UNESCO's vision of global citizenship education, and in light of the theme of the session, which is the contribution of love, I must admit that it was quite an intriguing assignment. Because as you can imagine, for us, the term love is not a usual term in our vocabulary, in our daily working on development and international cooperation. So I would like you to try to read between the lines of my presentation, an understanding how maybe UNESCO is promoting in its own way love for peace and love for humanity. And I think it's appropriate that I would follow the presentation that we just heard from Professor Skali, that I think set the ground for a spiritual understanding of this issue. So I would like to now maybe add to that another level of understanding which is grounded in development work and actual education. So there should be a PowerPoint presentation that I provided that should be coming up. I'm assuming. If not, well then I will just move forward without. Now, global citizenship education is one of the major priorities of the UNESCO's education sector and part of its current strategy. It is a term that has been around for decades in different disciplines and fields, but has emerged in the United Nations context with our former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, in New York, at a time where he was mobilizing member states around a new vision of education, around key pillars of what he thought were the major challenges for the 21st century. And one of those challenges, one of the three challenges that he brought, was that education is not only about bringing skills for the world of work, reading and writing and numeracy, of course, but it's actually bringing empowerment. It's actually bringing peace to the world. So seeing education as a vehicle to build just and sustainable societies was the third and maybe missing pillar from dominant discourse in education in the field of development, and had placed that center field, which was a great opportunity for UNESCO, because that is really the core of what UNESCO has been created to promote, as we all know, to build peace in the minds of women and men. So global citizenship has emerged as a key pillar, and also has emerged as a natural response to the way we are increasingly seeing the challenges that we face in the world. The threats of poverty that are beyond borders, of instability, of terror, of conflict, the challenges of flux of populations, of migration, and the worst cases of refugees, people fleeing conflict, of climate change, of course, which is now the #1 priority on many minds, causing all of the above. We see that borders cannot contain such issues. And so that growing up in the world today, young people need to have understanding of these global dynamics and how they affect them individually, their individual lives, but also how they can, in their individual lives, have an impact on these global challenges. Now, the challenges of understanding the increasing interdependence of people and places and institutions, and of the links between the local and the global are at the core of what we are trying to do. Insofar as the solutions that are required to address this challenge have to factor in these phenomenons. However, we're much aware that in most countries and around the world, education or basic education is certainly not sufficient. Putting children in school and making sure that they spend their days at schools will not resolve the problem and develop this sort of consciousness. We need a specific kind of education, rethinking education, thinking education out of the box, not just in school institutions, but as we say, non-formal education, out of the formal system, and informal education as well, through other means, culture, media, communities. But the actual contours of that education have yet to be determined. So for UNESCO, with its tradition in building peace in the minds of men, of peace education and human rights education, education for international understanding, we had a very good basis for conceptualizing this form of education which could provide an answer to our challenges. And so therefore, global citizenship education is understood by our organization as an education that aims to empower learners of all ages, so we've never exempted any age to learn, to assume active roles and to face and resolve global challenges, but also to become proactive contributors in our local and community environment for a more peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, and secure world. Now, this understanding of education global citizenship education was actually enshrined in the new SDG framework, if you're familiar with that, which is SDG 4 or Target 4.7 for those who are familiar with our jargon. So this global citizenship education has built into it an aspiration to a form of global citizenship. And this global citizenship is not a legal status. It's not a passport. It doesn't open to a series of rights defended necessarily by national institutions. It is essentially an aspiration. It is a self-proclaimed aspiration to develop a state of peace on Earth. Now, this vision of global citizenship education has therefore become a defining also element for UNESCO of quality education. And this is how it is portrayed in the vision of SDG 4. It is what links education to society, and not just education to work or to productivity, but to a collective and individual well-being. Now, I have a graph that I would like to have shown you, but that sort of captures this vision, and I'm trying to, again, to link it to this notion of love for the planet or love for peace. That is the core of the session. But I think I'll try to explain it to you without the visual. That another way of understanding global citizenship education for UNESCO is about different types of learning. It's about learning to love oneself, or to know who I am, my society, my context, my history. It's about understanding others in my community, who they are, and reaching out to them, loving my neighbor, loving others. It's about understanding the community in which I live and caring and investing in my community. And all of these relations determined by global processes. It is at the intersection of the individual, of other, the community, and a globalized world that one understands what is global citizenship. Now, concretely, UNESCO has tried to make this very clear for education institutions, because in a classroom, a teacher needs to know what are we teaching very concretely. So we've determined that that to teach global citizenship education is to actually invest 3 dimensions of learning. Is to speak to the head, to the heart, and to the hand, as some would say. To the head, which is cognitive skills. To the heart is to develop social emotional skills. And to the hand is to develop behavioral aptitudes. Cognitive skills, it's about learning the knowledge to understand local and global issues. It's to develop skills of critical and analytical thinking. And the social-emotional skills are skills of compassion, of empathy, of well-directed and concerned empathy, of sharing values of communication, solidarity, respect for difference, creativity. And then it's the skill learning dimension, the third learning dimension of the hand, or being able to act. Because it's not enough to know and to feel, it's about also bringing goodness and peace to the world, and being able to act effectively and responsibly at the local, national, regional, and global levels, and to stay motivated and willing to do so continuously. So those are how we have then concretely distilled these values, abstract notions of values, into clear learning objectives, and that we work with countries to integrate them in education systems. Now, this concept, as has just been underlined by the Professor Skali, resonates with cultures around the world. Hasn't been fabricated in the corridors of UNESCO, as you can imagine. It is very much a bottom-up approach, and we have found over the years, now for decades, UNESCO have seen that it is already there within cultures around the world. And that in some region we would talk about learning to live together, and not global citizenship education. In other regions we would talk about education for international understanding, or buen vivir in Latin America, or human rights education, or culture of peace education, or in some contexts I've heard as well, l'éducation au monde et aux autres, which is a nice phrased expression of the same values, or peace education. And this is the beauty of global citizenship education, is that all while it is promoted by an international organization, it is actually the sum total of values that are pre-existing its implementation by the organization. So I'll end here and by just simply saying so that this is the overall conceptual framework of global citizenship education. and that this is, guides us in our work to, as I said, to support reforms and curriculum, to train teachers, to then be able to create, to promote such values in the classrooms, to develop the pedagogies, the activities in classrooms, to create the school environments that are aligned, that share this ethos of global citizenship education. And also, more recently, it has this framework of global citizenship education has helped us to address the demands from member states to deal with the issues of the rise of violent extremism. Because unfortunately, we have seen this plague many countries and communities around the world, and countries want to be able to ensure that their education systems are contributing to preventing the spread of such ideologies. And for UNESCO, it is clearly global citizenship education that is the best tool at hand to do so. So we've been also engaging in this area of work more recently. So I will end here. That's my message to you on what UNESCO is contributing to build, I guess, love for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruprecht, for your presentation. And I think on this issue of global citizenship education, issues and prospects, there were many things which we could highlight. Firstly, that education is not just learning of sciences and knowledge in school. It is above all endowing oneself with a vision of the sustainable development of society and finding key areas of action which may prompt children to live together. And we need to think in terms of innovation in education and above all empower learners so that they can think about a more viable world. Global citizenship is a sort of development of peace across the globe, learning to love each other, and above all getting to know other people. That, I think, is what Ms. Ruprecht has talked about, the pooling of knowledge, and above all combating or teaching children as of today to combat different forms of extremism. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you very much, Ms. Ruprecht. If there are any questions, then you can take them up after the panel discussion is ended. So we shall now continue with the presentation by Venerable Shin, who's going to talk about true love education.
Distinguished ambassadors, distinguished religious leaders, distinguished guests, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. Today, I'm very happy to be here and to share with you my thoughts on love education, and particularly given the fact that our world, our century, faces this issue. It's one of the most important issues facing us today, especially how we can look at it from a religious standpoint. I believe that this is the core question that all of our religions need to address, because in all of our religions we talk about love. So if religion can go back to education, we will be able to save this world. We will be able to make society peaceful and harmonious so that everyone can be living in harmony and peace. That is why my teacher, Chin Kung, has met with the Malaysian Prime Minister And when he was discussing with the Prime Minister about how we can restore peace in this world,
问我的师父这个问题世界有和平吗？
my teacher asked,
我的师父说
so the Prime Minister asked my teacher,
第一个要做
is
到
there
的
peace in
是
this
国
world?
家跟国家的
My master said that the
平等
first thing we need to do
对待
is
相处
establish equal
第二个是
and harmonious coexistence between countries.
跟政党
Second,
之间要和睦相处
we need a peaceful coexistence of parties,
族群跟族群之
political
间
parties.
要和
And
睦
third,
相处
we need a
第四个
peaceful
是
coexistence
宗
of
教
families.
跟宗教之
Four,
间
peaceful
能
coexistence
够
of
做到和睦
religions.
相处所以这四个如果都能够
So
做
these
到
are four
平等对
preconditions,
待
and if
和睦
we
相处
can achieve
这个
them,
世界
if
就
we can
和平
achieve harmonious coexistence between these
长
four
老
groups,
听到
we
我
will achieve
师
peace.
父的这一番话
When the Prime Minister heard what my master said, he looked a bit
很长
stern,
的时间说不出话来
and he remained silent for a bit.
大概有5分钟
He remained silent for 5 minutes,
跟长老
and
说
this is when
这个事情
my
的确是
master
很难的
said with the Prime Minister, it's true, this is a very difficult
但
task.
是如果能够从团结宗教下手
However, if we can start about by bringing religions together, it's something we can actually accomplish.
因为现在
Why?
这个地球上
Because
信
today,
仰宗教的人
in this world,
多过不信宗教的人
more people believe in
尤其
religion
现在是一个民主的时代
than are
选民
atheists.
如果信仰宗教
We also live in an era of democracy. If there are more people who are religious than not,
团结起来
then religion can bring people together.
国家
Then
影
it
响政
can
党
impact our
影响族群
countries, our political parties,
那么这一番话
our
马哈
sovereignty.
蒂总理他有了
Now, when Prime
一些
Minister,
醒悟有一些理解
the Prime Minister heard this, he indicated that
今天
he understands
我们来就
Prime
这个
Minister
社会
Mohammed. And so today,
除了宗教
or in our society, in addition to religion, we have no other solutions. Religion is the only path.
这个社会很多的问题都解决不了
And without
可是
religion,
在
we cannot
1970年代
resolve
英国
many
哈
issues
勒比博士
in our
曾经说
society.
要解决21世纪的社会问题
Someone once said that if we want to solve the questions of the 21st century,
孔孟学说是儒教
Buddhism is the
大乘
only
佛法是佛教
path. Confucianism say that Confucianism is the only path. Now, these are some
是英国人讲
schools of thought that are in China,
那么
and this was something that was said by an Englishman.
传统文化圣贤的
Actually, all of the lessons that we learn from traditional culture are a form of religion.
我
Why?
们一般都想到
Because normally,
这个宗教教育那只有佛教
religious education is associated with Buddhism,
真
Christianity,
正的宗教
Hinduism. But what is true religion?
是主要的是重要的是遵从
The
的
first syllable of religion in Chinese means most important, the main
这
thought.
些宗教
And the second
所有
syllable
的包括
refers
你
to
提到的
sages
英国
or
的
teachings.
这些教育通通都是宗教教育
So that is why traditional teachings are all religious
我们的
teachings in a way.
教育
That is
要
why
回归到宗
today
教教育
our religion, our education has to go back to a religious
最重要
education.
的我们要知道
Now, what's the most important component of a religious education? We know
我们
that
人跟人的之间
what we
这个关
see
系
when we establish
最开始
interpersonal
是从
relationships,
家庭开始
it all starts with the family.
那么这个教育呢其实就从家庭
And education
从
is also born within the
对
family.
儿女这个教育
It comes from our parents who instill education
在
upon
中
us.
国这个教育
And in China,
当然我们是从胎教就开始教了可是呢
of course, education started with Taoism. But if we look at modern
从
China,
小孩子
what we
眼睛
can
张
see
开
is as soon as a child opens his or her eyes, they can hear, they can see, they can receive information from the outside world, and we must take care to properly educate these children. This is extremely important.
我的老师
And that is why
监空老和尚
my
有一次在
master
日本开会
also once attended a conference in Japan. And during the conference, one time he was
去散步
eating breakfast, and after he ate breakfast, he went for a walk, and he saw a young mother
一辆小车子
with a
小孩
stroller.
子才4个月
Her baby was just 4 months
我的
old,
师傅就看到
and my master saw the mother with her
看
child.
他妈妈的那个表情
he saw the baby looking at its mother's expression. This was the relationship between parent and child, and this is at the core of education. And this is also the origin of education in China. Relationship between fathers and children and mothers and children. So the baby whom my master saw in Japan didn't know how to speak. He couldn't speak yet. But he was still able to look at his mother's facial expression and the way its mother was looking at it. And my master could see the love in their relationship. This kind of parental love. So thousands of years ago in China, we considered this to be the origin of love. Love of relatives is natural. It's not something that's artificial. And that is why today in our education we should think about how throughout our lives we should maintain this love without allowing it to undergo any changes. This is something that does not change actually. This is the first goal of education. Love of relatives. The second goal of education is education of love. How can we increase this love? How can we expand in this love so that people love their brothers and sisters and parents? How can we expand on this concept? So that people love their great-grandparents, their entire family, their neighbors, other members of society, the country where they live, so that all people in this world can experience love. Everyone should experience this feeling. And that's why if you understand Chinese culture, you will know that the goal of Chinese education is to love the entire world. This is what love is. In Buddhism, we don't talk about love. We talk about benevolence. Now, why do we talk about benevolence and not not love? Because love implies emotional feeling, whereas benevolence is more focused on wisdom. Love is centered on emotion. And if you want to love everyone, it has to be founded on benevolence and mercy. And if it's founded on emotion rather than benevolence, it can lead to some secondary effects. It's not a kind of stable love. So that is why in Buddhism, when we discuss love, we ascribe certain particular characteristics to it. And when the sages talk about love, when we compare it with the love of gods, the love of saints, actually it's all the same type of love. It is all love from people's hearts. And in today's religions, we want people to receive guidance from the saints to develop love and love all people around the world. This is a characteristic of Chinese traditional culture, and you can see that it is inseparable from some religious concepts. And then if we use this love, if we apply it to politics, we can have a political love. We can apply it to business, to companies, societies, and communities. So we can use this concept of love of relatives and use this idea to serve all of humanity, to feel that all people around the world are connected to us, and to do things not for our own sake, but for the sake of others. Because if you're doing things just for yourself, you can do them as you like. But if you do them for others, or in accordance with the guidance of gods or saints, you are truly trying to serve others, and that is the main idea of religion. So Chinese traditional culture teaches us that all of the love taught to us by saints is a universal concept. But now, since we're here, I believe that we need to realize it in practice. This is not just theoretical. If you haven't displayed this love, then you haven't truly implemented it into practice. Before 2003, we saw that our Master Chinkang, when he was in Rujiang, and then in 2005 this was in Anhui, Anshi, he conducted an experiment. And this experiment lasted about 3 years. It was extremely successful. And the goal of the experiment was to display love, to demonstrate what love is. So what did he do? He used traditional Chinese culture to teach the people in these villages, and there were 48,000 of them from all walks of life, learning together. And as a result, within just 3 or 4 months, this led to extremely successful results. He showed that people are innately kind, and people do have a kind of innate love. People did not engage in misdeeds as much. They were much more benevolent towards the other villagers. So we can say that the lives of these villagers were turned around 180 degrees. This is a demonstration of how we can use traditional Chinese culture to create programs. And in fact, the results are extremely fast to appear. Within just a few years, everything was turned around in these villages. And in China, we have an ancient Chinese saying that people are innately kind. They're innately good. And we have a saying that man's innate nature is benevolent. So we fully believe this. This is not something that we could just teach. When people are born, they are innately good. And as long as you study, as long as you try to improve, as long as you learn about causality and morality, it is extremely effective in changing your behavior for the better. This experiment which took place in China demonstrates that human nature is innately good, and this was an extremely useful experiment. Of course, it doesn't mean that people don't do evil deeds, but rather that human nature is innately benevolent. And in China during the Ming Dynasty, there was a scholar named Wang Yangming. Wang Yangming was a famous scholar. He was a famous philosopher. He was also a Buddhist. And he advocated for bringing people into harmony with nature. And he also supported the thesis that humans are innately kind. And in Japan, in South Korea, in many countries, in many regions, his school of thought was extremely influential. And there was one day when Wang Yangming went out of his home, and he was caught by some bandits. Actually, when the bandits learned that they captured some people, including Wang Yangming, they had great respect for him because they had heard of him. And Wang Yangming was advocating for human nature being viewed as kind. So the bandits said, well, why don't you prove that we as bandits have a kind nature? Can you show us that we, the bandits, are good-natured? And if you can prove it, then we will release you. So Wang Yangming told the bandits, sure, but there's a precondition. You have to listen to what I say. You have to listen to me. I'll tell you what to do, and then you have to do it. And in that way, I can prove that your nature is innately good. The bandits agreed. So Wang Yangming said, number one, first you have to take off your jacket. And they did.
再来，把你
Next,
的上衣脱了，
you have to take off your shirt.
好，再来，
And they did that.
把你的裤子脱掉，
Next, you have to take off your pants.
裤子脱掉。
Okay,
最
so
后
the bandits took off their pants. And now what? Well, their underwear was left.
内裤也要脱掉。
So he said, okay, you have to take off your underwear too.
结果呢，这个土匪啊说不行不行不行。
So, but the bandits said, no, 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 we can't. That's really the limit. We can't go beyond this.
这个不能再脱了。
We can't take off any more
结果王阳
clothes.
明就说你看
And so Wang Yangming
这是
said,
什么？
see,
这就是有羞愧之心。
what does this mean? This means that you have a sense of shame. You have a good human nature.
我们今天呢就知道，
And
人都有。
this is why today we know that every human being has this sense of shame and
被
dignity.
土匪
And as a result, Wang Yangming was released by the bandits who had kidnapped him.
我们做这个小镇实验，做这个示范。
So the experiment which I was telling you about, this pilot program in the small villages in China, shows that human nature is innately good.
我们一定要有信心。
We
那
have
么这
to
个信心
have confidence in this concept.
就是让我们知
And the
道
most important thing is for us to remember
跟圣
that
贤
we need to
这些祖宗
properly learn from the sages. We have to learn from our
最
ancestors.
重要的，
And this learning
我觉
process
得就是
I
要
think
有一个示范点。
requires some pilot programs, some concrete examples.
现在我们净空老和尚教我们要做一条龙，
Now,
所以要从小来教学从幼稚园。
we are called on to be consistent in our education. So we should start in elementary school, in middle
受
school.
到社会的污染。
And during this period, we should not allow our children to be polluted by some of the ideas in society. They should start learning traditional culture from a young age.
在有一些地方
There are some places right now
好的效果，
where we have accomplished great progress with our education program. And we hope that
来公布，
we will soon be able to report on this progress
让我们
and
真正相信
share the results with you so that you can learn from
教
them
得好。
and increase our confidence in the fact that we can provide a proper education.
我们今天呢，要真正
Today,
帮助别人，
we should truly try to help others. And in order to help them, people have to accept your help.
可是呢，
We want to properly educate
这
people,
必须要有
but
善缘，
the Buddhist scriptures
这
say
个是善缘，
that you have
所
to
以这个
be
善缘很重要。
benevolent.
如果我们今天用最好的方法，
If we use the best
可
methods,
是你呢跟他呢缘不好，
but you have bad karma with them, then you have bad karma. So you must have good karma as the foundation of this.
我们的起心动念，我们的想法看法，
So
我们
our
必须
thoughts,
要跟别
our
人、跟一切众
opinions
生都结下善缘，
have to have
这样
good
来
karma
才能够达到这个
in their connections with
教
others.
学的成就。
And that is the precondition for a successful
佛经上
education.
有个故事，
And here I'd like to share another story from the Buddha.
他呢
There's the Moni Buddha
舍利弗
and another
有一
Buddha.
段因缘，这个因缘是什么呢？就是
They have
有一
a
次释迦牟尼佛到一个村庄去度化
experience
众
where the
生
Muni
结果
Buddha comes
这
to
个
a
村庄的人
village,
见到释迦牟尼佛
and the people from the village meet the Buddha,
都关门，
And
不理释迦牟尼佛，
closed their
所以
doors. They
释迦
didn't
牟
want to
尼
meet
佛
with the
要来这边
Buddha.
教化众生来度人很难没有人要理他。
So it was very
结
difficult
果
for
呢
the Buddha to
释迦
find
牟尼
anyone to
佛
speak to.
回去以后，
And after the Buddha
就
went
跟
back,
舍利佛就是他的弟子舍利佛尊者说，
he had a student Buddha of his, and he told his student, these people
你呢去
have
教化他们。
have their karma is connected to you, their destiny is connected to you, so you should go and teach them.
教化
So he
这个村
sent
庄
his disciple to
结
the
果呢
village,
舍利佛果然跟他们的缘特别好，法缘殊胜，
and this student Buddha had very good karma with the villagers, and everybody
都
loved
听
him.
舍利佛的教化，
He had a predestined relationship with the
整个村
villagers.
庄的人都得度了。
So as a result, all of the people from the village were able to accept his
佛的其他的
teachings.
弟子就问佛他说：“您老人家这个福德庄严都这么圆满，
And
为什么
this was
你
because
讲经
of
说法
the
人家
disciples'
不听你的呢？
relationship with the village.
听舍利佛的舍利佛人家教化
So
大家
when
都欢喜
the
都接受
Buddha was asked about why the villagers accepted his disciples' teachings but not the Buddha's
因
teachings,
为舍利
and
佛
he said
在过去生中
it's because
曾
the
经遇到了一窝的
disciple
蜜蜂，
Buddha had some experiences in his past life.
心中就发了愿，他说将来我得到的时候，我成就的时候，
And when he was to be reincarnated, he was meant to go teach villagers. And so that is why the villagers were able to accept the teachings of the disciple Buddha. And the people were extremely welcoming of him. This is what I call good karma. So today, we should have an attitude of equality, of mutual respect, to try to teach others. Each of us should be on an equal footing. This is the most important thing. No one is lower in the hierarchy than anyone else. And no matter whether we are speaking about religion or different professions, this is the attitude we should adopt, and it's extremely important. Especially when we have a feeling of frustration or complaint, it immediately affects our karma. This is why we often say, the reason we have a bright future is because of our good karma from our past deeds. And that is why people will come to help you, because of your good karma. That is why when we speak about love education, we should first implement a religious education to improve our karma, so that we can share this love with everyone, with all animals. And this is the most important foundation for a love education. This is what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Wu Shin, for this very detailed presentation, very rich in lessons. But what's most important, I think, is to take from this that the solid foundation for citizenship lies in religion. All religions speak of love, but how does one restore peace in the world? Venerable Wu Shin is proposing that we reconcile the religions in order to bring about true peace. And the only way to save our communities is religion, taking education back to its origins, religious education, beginning with the family unit. The link between the mother and the child is the basis for social love, and we should do everything possible to maintain this love through education. Children should grow up with a feeling that they love others, and you should learn to love all of humanity and establish ties between people and all God's creatures. But the key factor is you must always keep in mind that respect for others is important. Respect is critical. So thank you very much, Venerable Wu Shin, and I shall now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ahmad Jalali to talk about ethics, communication and education for global citizenship. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I would like again to thank all who helped us to organize such a wonderful gathering. The title of my presentation is Ethics, Communication and Education for Global Citizenship. The terms are so rich: global citizenship, ethics, education, communication. We have been listening here yesterday, today, and we will listen more. When, for example, one source of human behavior, an important source in culture is religion, we heard that all religions invite for love, and they share the same essence. Okay, we get together in this very calm, good weather of room 11 in UNESCO. We came from different parts, and we say wonderful, beautiful things about the essence of religion. We say that all religion cries for love, share the same essence. But this is what we talk about here. And when we go out of this room, we will have coffee together and chat together wonderfully. But what about the reality on the earth? The reality is that people, most of the time, have been killing. They are killing each other for religion, sometimes. Then, how we can transform ideals here that we talk about the essence of religion, for example, to the reality on the grassroots. Out of this room, on the society, situation is different. And we should find a real way out of our wonderful desires here to educate our societies. Now we are talking about ethics, as is the title of my intervention. Which kind of ethics? Let us think. It has been decades that we are getting used to the term of market economy, an economy which is conducted by market. After that, from some decades ago, we started to realize that, we have market society as well. And then all of them transforms to market politics. And then even market democracy. And even we can claim now that with the communication tools, probably we are in danger of market ethics. Democracy, economy, politics, even ethics are conducted by market. This is part of the realities, not all realities. Here we are to see how we can look at the real problem of education, that probably we can get out of this vicious circle. First of all, we cannot give all hopes to politicians. Karl Popper, first of all, I should say that in my intervention, I will use some ideas of Karl Popper, of Hans-Georg Gadamer, and Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, the famous Persian thinker and poet. Karl Popper has a wonderful saying. He said that all politicians who give promise that will make paradise on earth for people, they will make a hell. Therefore, we as thinkers, we as teachers, we cannot and we should not claim that we are going to make paradise on this earth for people. But rather, we should try to lessen people's pain and suffering. We know that heavy rainfall should not motivate us to plan to change the laws of the laws of the nature and the sky. Instead, it should encourage us to think how to find an umbrella. This is the way that we can go through education. For all of this, we have to learn and to educate the art of dialogue. The art of dialogue. Let me talk about that. It is not that simple thing. Dialogue by its nature is not a compromise-oriented process at all. Sometimes people say that let's have a dialogue because we have to share some ideas to come to a compromise point. To come to a compromise point is not a dialogue, it is negotiation. I've been saying in this house many times in years that negotiation is different from dialogue. Religiosity should prepare us for dialogue. Negotiation comes from negotio, means to do business, to gain something. Dialogue is different. Dialogue is not a compromise-oriented process at all. It involves no deal, no pre-established plan, and no pre-desired end. It is a truthful journey towards an unknown fate, an unpredictable destination. It is in a genuine dialogue, the partners will not mark the process. Rather, they are integrated into and led by the process. While in negotiation, they lead the process. It is different. In a genuine dialogue, we genuinely help our partners to consider other choices open to him. Victory is then an empty set, an irrelevant concept which poisons the spirit of dialogue. Without understanding that to potentially risk one's own position is essential to a genuine dialogue, one would not, then without that, one would not be its genuine partner. Dialogue relies on thinking and not on arguing. Thus, our thought might welcome and help the other side to strengthen his hidden objections instead of trying to reveal his weakness. In negotiation, because we want to gain something, we try to reveal the weakness of the other side. In dialogue, this is not the case. We exhaust, in dialogue, we exhaust our intellectual curiosity to discover and grasp the true logic behind his ideas, the idea of the other side, and remove all factors which suppress their validity. In a dialogue, we genuinely want to know more, to upgrade our level of understanding, and to develop a new layer of our overall insight. Learning is a process which requires the capability for the conversion of the soul. As classical philosophers pointed out, the greater then the variety of opinion, the more richness, fruitfulness, validity, and gain is involved, and not the more trouble. And not the more trouble. Then questioning is the intellectual vehicle for the dialogue to retain its original nature. Thus, to conduct a dialogue genuinely, priority must be given to the questions rather than the answers. In our act of questioning, if our act of questioning is genuine, so will be the desire to listen. Let me explain. A great part of the fights in this world is because we don't listen to each other. We pretend we are listening. While we are listening, in fact, we are arguing inside us against. We are reacting against. We are thinking in a noise-polluted area of ideas. Religion invites to silence. Silence means making an environment for the possibility of listening. Listening is different from hearing. We hear, but we don't listen. I'm sure in all of genuine religions there is such an invitation. Let me give you an example from the Quran. إذا قرأ القرآن فاستمعوا له وأنصتوا. Invites that when you read this book, keep silent from inside, to be able to listen. In a dialogue, we pretend we have dialogue with each other, but in fact, we are trying to follow our pre-established goals, which is against the genuine dialogue. The art of dialogue enjoys the same nature as the art of thinking, the art of questioning, and the art of listening, as if we are taking the other as a medium to ultimately talk to ourselves. In a dialogue, we are taking other only as a medium to be able to talk to ourselves, not to argue over, not to win. Winning is an empty set in dialogue. It's meaningless. While in negotiation, winning is the goal. We return in dialogue, we return to our spirit from what is other and feel at home in the alien. We are then actors and acted upon at the same time. We are actors and acted upon at the same time. Such a wonderful, smooth oscillation. This is the nature of dialogue. This somehow reminds me of Jalaluddin Rumi's mystical teachings in his Masnavi. He said, Man kasi dar no kasi dar yaftam. Let me read the translation. I found true individuality in non-individuality. Therefore, I wove my individuality into non-individuality. Whoever you deemed to be a lover, regard him as the beloved. For relatively, he is both this and that. Without being beloved, you cannot be a lover. And if those who are thirsty seek water in the world, so water also seeks those in the world who are thirsty. The art of questioning, listening, and thinking all requires openness, in which the process of dialogue would breathe. In order to understand, one needs to listen, while one would like to speak in order to be understood. It is through the art of listening that separate segments of knowledge, values, and beliefs would turn to a harmonized package only through the art of listening. Harmonized package. It is for this reason that I really love this phrase of UNESCO Constitution. I will read for you. Says, ignorance of each other's waves of life has been a common cause throughout the history of mankind, of the suspicion and mistrust between the peoples of the world, through which their differences have all too often broken into wars. Karl Popper have a good suggestion, said that we human beings should not kill and tear each other apart. Instead, we should let our theories fight each other through dialogue. Okay, then there are a lot I want to explain, but I think I don't have time. But what I want to say is that when you come to the concept of global education, global citizenship, this means that you are introducing a modality for a genuine dialogue, that you are both acting and acted upon. Otherwise, it is impossible. For global citizenship, you should have that education which make us pregnant of that idea. And that pregnancy should go through its turn. Let me again give an example of Jalaluddin Rumi. He says that blood does not become sweet milk until our fortune gives birth to a new baby. Look at the body of the mother. when a mother is pregnant, during this process of 9 months, during this process, it is thought the miracle that the dark, bitter blood will become sweet, white milk for the baby. This process will not happen unless you are able to give birth to a new idea. To a new idea. In this visionary mystical paradigm, where knowledge embraces not only rational and intellectual knowledge, but also that which is intuitive, when a specific desire or a presupposed tendency appears, the art of understanding becomes hidden. 100 wails rise from the heart and the eye. Let me put an end. I should drop part I wanted to say. Let me end with this again, Jalaluddin Rumi. He said that it is a mistake that we think for global citizenship we need a common language. Yes, speaking in one language can help, but this is not necessarily a vehicle for dialogue. He said that to speak the same tongue is a kinship and affinity. A man, when he is with those in whom he cannot confide, is like a prisoner in chains. Or many are the people that speak the same tongue, or many of them are feeling stranger to each other, and there are many people who do not speak in the same tongue, but they are affiliated to each other. Therefore, the tongue of mutual understanding is different indeed. To be one in heart is better than to be one in tongue, without speech and without sign or a scroll. Hundreds of thousands of interpreters arise from the heart. For Jalaluddin Rumi, it is the communicative vision which not only cause words to evaporate, but also introduces a unifying paradigm between the self, the other, and the world. And this is the reason he said that قافیه اندیشم و دلدار من. They are giving sign to me that I should stop. Okay? I do not continue that final rhyme, that final poem of Jalaluddin Rumi, but let me only read one line. I am thinking of rhymes, and my sweetheart says to me, think of nothing except my vision. Thank you.
Je vous remercie,
Thank you, Ambassador Jalali, for kindly abridging your presentation. In all his interventions, there is great knowledge. In Ambassador Jalali's presentations, but his greatest virtue is that he always finishes with a poem. And he was poised to give us another poem. Unfortunately, he was stuck for time and he forewent it. But he has given us many lessons. And I'd like to ask the interpreters to give us 10 more minutes to conclude, because we're taking perhaps a little too much time, but just 10 minutes to finish with a couple of questions, please.
Merci.
Your Excellencies, thank you very much, because you've highlighted many things in your presentations, particularly ethics. You've clearly spelled out what ethics involves here. Ethics with respect to the economy, with respect to politics. And you don't have much trust or much faith in politicians, because they tend to lead us to hell when they announce or offer us paradise. The key question is to reflect on the problems posed by education. And in this exercise, you have prompted us to understand the difference between negotiation and dialogue. Negotiation is a compromise. Dialogue has no compromise. It is conducted through a process which it develops itself. And querying and questioning prompts the other person to react and make choices. That is what the ambassador has been driving at. But in dialogue, dialogue is critical in overcoming a dialogue of the deaf, with the key protagonists very often not listening to each other, but in a sincere dialogue, you listen to the other person and you allow that other person to choose and progress. So thank you, Ambassador Jalali, for all these lessons you've imparted. Ladies and gentlemen, the panelists are here on the podium. You've listened to them. Doubtless you have questions to ask them. And I open the floor.
Oui, juste devant moi.
Yes, in front of me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just since yesterday, I'm listening 3 words, Faouzi, Skali. One was secularism, religion, and atheist. Nobody said about atheist. For me, a good religion is secular because it allows everybody to practice. They never dominate. You are free like anybody. For me, the meaning of religion was that. So for me, religion is the secular thing. Why we confuse these two things with the secular? What is secular definition? Atheist, secular, and religion. For me, religion, the good religion and the real practice of a religion is in fact the most secular.
Yes, thank you. Well, perhaps it's better if the speakers answer straight away, because the questions are targeted, and if we take several questions before they're answered, we may get a bit lost. So the question was to Dr. Faouzi. Skali, he has the floor. Yes, of course. We know it's a critical question, crucial, because it permeates the modern day. How can manage the multiplicity of religions without one of them becoming predominant vis-à-vis the others? And in some countries, the secularism was the solution that was found. But it well understood that it's not anti-religious secularism, but it leaves every religion an opportunity to express itself. Now, what I was trying to convey was that when we're together, there's something we have in common, which is values. And at the heart of each religion, there are values. which converge. There's common ground amongst those values, amongst our religions. That's the common patrimony of all religions. But there are also differences, and we're entitled to have differences between religions. Not all religions need to be alike, and I think a difference is a treasure in itself. But to be able to respect and even to teach all of these religions, it's not a battle or a row over convictions. What often triggers conflict and dispute, and I think the previous presentation from Ambassador Jalali has clearly explained it. Each and every one is going to try and impose and convince and win over in that sort of situation, which leads to conflict. And we're in UNESCO, and we're reflecting on how to create coexistence and conviviality. So you need to approach religions from an anthropological standpoint, human diversity, irrespective of the convictions which may be personal. Convictions must remain personal. What we believe and don't believe is completely personal. But the heritage, the inheritance, the wisdom, art through religion, poetry. Rumi, who was frequently quoted by Ambassador Jalali, and that's a common heritage of humanity, of all religions, as is the case for Tzu and Buddha and so on. So that is the basis, I think, for finding conviviality, but not turning religions into ideologies, but rather spiritual patrimony of humankind. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Skali. We have still a few minutes, and we'll take just one or two questions before the interpreters have to leave us. In front of me there.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My question is particularly to Professor Skali. I really admire the vision of gathering people together for festivals. We have spoken a number of times about how to encourage young people to engage, and young people gather for music festivals. Songs and music videos are ways that they share ideas. And so I wonder if in the music festival there is a direct intention to gather young people for that. That's one. And the second is, I wonder if the festival commissions new work, particularly to encourage that vision of being related to each other as a common humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Skali. Well, I think, as we've just been saying, art is part and parcel of one's patrimony, one's heritage.
It's okay if I'm answering in French.
Is it all right if I answer in French as the speaker? It fits within one's heritage, and thereupon it's part of what is lived experience, and it becomes a means of communication. And I think there's special work involved here, because I think today's youth is not too interested in heritage. They want to get on with life. So there's a lot to be done in terms of education for them to understand that will enrich their personality and even their citizenship, which is what the other speaker stressed earlier. So there's work still to be done. Spiritual music and so on is a source of interest for a cultured audience, but I think there needs to be a shift from there towards education in the spiritual heritage, which should be all the more feasible if it is not addressed at convictions, but rather at the inherent richness of this heritage, which may be the source of creativity and inspiration. One or two last questions. We've got 2 minutes. Let's look the other direction. You have the floor, sir.
Oui, je voulais juste.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question, which is also a comment. A little earlier, we were hearing about the three great religions of the book, the revealed religions, and from those three revealed religions, we have what Priscilla referred to, which is antagonistic to the idea of the three religions of the book, when we're talking about the dialogue that's bringing us together, because hierarchization should disappear, in my opinion. And how can we reconcile the idea of the three great religions of the book at a spiritual and religious music festival where most of the sources, or a large part of the sources, are not from the three revealed religions? Thank you. Dr. Skali, you're in the firing line again. Does somebody else perhaps wish to answer? Madam Ruprecht? Ms. Ruprecht? Well, I'm terribly sorry, but I feel like I'm repeating myself. But at the same time, that's a absolutely critical question. I said that we were talking about democracy and citizenship, and so we need to envisage a democracy of cultural communities and spiritual communities, to put them on the same footing, so to speak. And Amartya Sen was talking about this, I referred to it earlier, democracy of cultures and religions, alongside democracy of individuals, so that there's governance, because we're not going to intervene in the same way when it comes to value judgments as regards what's superior and what isn't. Each and every one has to convey a lesson and a message, and then it's for every person to do their own religion, so to speak. That's why the Sacred Music Festival is not just those three religions. It's music from cultures around the world. If we had from culture from South Africa, for example, which could express what is sacred in different forms of expression in different ways, and I think that is what makes it so rewarding and so interesting. Thank you, Dr. Skali. Your Excellency.
From another angle, a very brief comment with you. If a musician is playing music, we enjoy that. If he is playing in a very high level, sometimes instead of enjoying the sound, we gaze on the movement of the beauty of the movement of the hands of the musicians. This is another level. And there is another supreme level, that you are not anymore involved in the sound. You go beyond the beauty of the movement of the hands of the musicians, but you feel that you are becoming notes and played. This is religion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Thank you, Ambassador Jalali. You will excuse us. We are stuck for time. The interpreters are going to leave, and we will not have any interpretation. So what I suggest is that the panelists are here. You can come up and meet them in a corridor or just outside the room, and you can go on asking them your questions. But as far as the room is concerned, if we were to continue the debate, we wouldn't be able to do it properly because the interpreters have to leave. So I'd like to thank all the interpreters for their generosity with their time. for giving us not just 10 but 15 extra minutes, way beyond the scheduled time. So I'd like to thank them on behalf of each and every one of you. And we now come to the end of this panel. I'd like to thank all the panelists on behalf of all of you. And I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you all.